So now let's continue on to the lecture, and we're going to talk about how this Masques and Les Joyeuses were opposite twins, yeah? So let's get going. Here. Okay, so today we're going to talk about this specifically about the tales of tragedy and ecstasy in Masques. Tragedy in Masques and ecstasy in Les Joyeuses. So as you probably know, a lot of us know Les Joyeuses because it's the more popular piece. But in fact, actually, these two pieces were written around the same time, 1903 to 1904. But actually, Les Joyeuses was written first before the joyful island trip with the mistress Emma. So we're going to talk about what is similar between these two pieces and what is contrasting between these two pieces. So in fact, I also just found out that these two pieces, Masques and Les Joyeuses, were originally intended to be part of this new Suite Bargamasque. So as we know that the Suite Bargamasque had declared the Lune, this is not the one. So this is actually conceived as the second Suite Bargamasque. So that was actually in the account where Debussy was playing these three pieces for his friend Ricardo Vignin. So we're going to find out, just based on that historical truth, we're going to find out what is so similar about Masques and Les Joyeuses. So Masques as being the first movement, and the second movement was actually a slow saraband. They later found out to be this Don Cohere Suisse. So it means from the sketchbooks. So if you have that Durand Debussy book, the collection of his piano composition, you will find that piece there. So the third movement being the Les Joyeuses. So now we're going to talk about what is similar and what's different between these two pieces. Now, the very obvious one, Masques and Les Joyeuses, they share the same tonal center on A. As you can see from the score, this opens with A minor, yeah, but it ends on an A major chord. So it changes, and while Les Joyeuses also start with the A major, as you've heard before. So this is the same thing that they really, if they should be played together, performed together, they would, normally perform would start with Masques and then continue with Les Joyeuses. Okay, so next, now what else is similar is the internal structure. If you notice in the very beginning, we have this lively rhythmic structure, right? And like a dance rhythm, and it goes on for a while. And then of course, in the middle, you have a sudden shift of mood, going to a long, broader melodic line. And then in the middle passage, you have slower section, and it happens in these two pieces. Then the rhythmic passage come back again as a recap, and then followed by coda. It's actually in the coda that these two pieces are very, very different. So Masques actually resolved to a very quiet ending. It ends with you can tell the tragedy when you heard that Masques, it ends with silence. That was true tragedy, whereas this Les Joyeuses actually reach like fortissimo, it reaches the climax very noisily. It's very symphonic. So it's in ecstasy. So that's basically what's the most obvious if you just heard it just once. Okay, the most obvious differences between these two pieces. So this is what I was talking about. So the end of Masques, we have the ends very quietly. So this is the coda. In Les Joyeuses, you heard just now was very big chord. This is big symphonic structure. The sound world is big, and it's celebration of ecstasy. So that's clearly the big difference between these two pieces. So this is the story. I'm going to start talking about the story, what's going on actually. Yeah, in the summer of 1904, this has become one of the most famous story. As you know, Debussy knew this Emma Bardak is actually the mother of his student. So somehow something happened, and he fell in love with this woman, and they eloped to Jersey Island, and that was actually where Debussy wrote Masques. Originally was written in that island, but Les Joyeuses was actually written before the trip. So it was actually just revised, and then it was sent from that island to the publisher Durand. So other pieces that was actually revised, that has been written but just revised on Jersey Island, is Fate Gallant Book 2. It's actually collections of songs based on poetry by Paul Verlaine. I'm going to share one of the poetry by Paul Verlaine at the very end of this lecture, because I really think that it describes a lot about the ending of Masques. And also, of course, La Mer was actually, he was inspired by the sea at Jersey Island, and that's where he wrote this La Mer, composed of 3 movements. Okay, so that's the picture of Debussy and Emma Bardak. So what happened during that time? Debussy was just torn with his marriage. He was not happy. And at the same time, he also felt guilty that he had to leave his wife. He had to actually lie to his wife that he had to go somewhere. He actually sent Lily away to his parents so that he could go to this Jersey Island with Emma Bardak. So you could feel this tragic expression in the end of Masques. And then, of course, Les Joyeuses is the celebration of Debussy's love affairs with Emma Bardak, and you could hear this too. Why these 2 pieces are very, very different. One, you could hear the tragedy, and the other one is really ecstatic. It's about celebration of love. It's really, you could hear so much freedom, so much dance rhythm in that piece. Now we're going to talk specifically more about Masques, about the tales of tragedy. And there are 3 important factors that really influence the composition of Masques. So the first thing is, of course, Debussy's personal crisis with his wife, Lily. And then we're going to talk about the Watteau's painting that actually describe what is going on in Masques. And then we're going to talk about Paul Verlaine's poetry. So these are the 3 important inspirations. So let's talk a little bit about the definition of masque. When we talk about masque, there are different kinds of masque. This is expressive masque. So masque actually reflect ambiguity and mystery. Okay, there's something hidden beneath that fine-looking mask. We don't know if it's the feeling of humor or tragedy. We don't know if it's happy or sad or guilt or resentment or joy. Those are just surprises. So in Masque, in this piece, we should, as a listener, expect surprises. And as a performer, we should learn to deal with spontaneity and the surprises that happen, the sudden shift of mood that happens so fast. So that's the basic definition of Masque. And this is the painting of Watteau that I was talking about, that I really need you to take a look at this picture. If this is your first time, I'm going to talk about what is going on in this picture. So from the title, it says Mezzatine. It was painted by Watteau in 1717. Mezzatine is actually a comical character from the Italian comedy theater. So we see here this comic character. He was not actually expressing happiness, but here he was actually feeling quite sad. And while serenading himself with mandolin at a garden, there's no one beside him. He's alone. He's clearly alone. And we see there's a marble statue who even turned her face away from him. So we could see this is a painting that really paints tragic, but it's, at the same time, it's humorous because he dressed so strangely as a clown. So we could feel the simultaneous feelings of humor and tragedy. And this is at the very heart of Watteau's painting. Watteau's painting actually influenced the poet Paul Verlaine and then Debussy himself. And in Masques, it's very important that you should be able to feel both humor and tragedy. And we know that Masques express Debussy's own personal crisis. Beneath its lively rhythmic ostinato cover-up, we could hear from the beginning all this rhythmic ostinato is very apparent, even until the very end. That the rhythm of the mandolin is very clearly heard. So now we're going to talk about the music very specifically. And here is the first masque. Okay, and right from the very beginning, the first masque is marked by the lively rhythmic ostinato of mandolin that occurs throughout the piece. So if you hear, and this keeps going on for the first page now, and then we want to know what is the hidden emotional feeling in this opening lively passage, because we know the title is already Masques, so we must expect something hidden beneath it. So where's the tragedy? Where is the tragic? At first hearing, you won't hear anything unless you look into the score a little bit deeper. And actually, if you read until the end, then you will discover what is the tragic melody. So I found myself actually still looking at the first when I learned this piece. Not until a while then I started looking at this. Of course, it's very obvious. First, he underlined this. Could that be the tragic melody? We don't know. So let's just discover what is going on. So this was the picture again. As you listen to the opening of this piece, I want you to imagine Le Major Theme, this picture by Watteau, which is actually a painting about someone dressed strangely as a clown while expressing a tragic feeling. So when you hear, let's listen to this. Could you hear the feeling of tragic? So I want you to look at this picture, and when you listen to this opening, you should be able to find out where is the tragic melody, and you should expect something. So after we did it, so I see that Debussy was really consistent with this melody. Because this melody, the hidden tragic melody, happened again at the very end. Okay, let me repeat that again. So the opening tragic melody that appeared in the very beginning, it was repeated at the very end. At the very end, when you see this chordal structure, there's no more, there's nothing like that. So these signify that the mask has been taken off, or it fell off, and it reveals his tragic feeling. So I'm going to play just at the end. So this in the very beginning, but at the end is this is how Debussy developed his motive. It doesn't develop as much as how German composer would actually develop it. So he would put a flat here to express even more intense tragedy in this melody. And also this same thing happened too. It happened again at the very end in chordal structure. It's as if this piece is actually transporting us to a world that's beyond this world. It's like in the realm of ghost. Actually, the Paul Verlaine poetry is going to talk about these two ghosts having a conversation. I will show you that at the very end. So this, we are just talking about the tragic melody. So now we understand that is the tragic melody, and that is what Debussy is trying to tell us, that this is not Italian comedy piece. This is not comical. I am experiencing something very regret. I feel tragic. So this is a tragedy. Then very interestingly, here we don't see any rhythmic ostinato of the mandolin playing. It is not happening here, but we have a hiccup here, offbeat chords. What is he doing here? When I was practicing this, I'm trying to understand what is Debussy trying to express here. And then when I put in a bracket, this melody, does that remind you of a certain composer from Russia that composed this piece? You know, very famous, the opening of Piano Concerto No. 1. I just found out, I think really it resembles, maybe Debussy is quoting Tchaikovsky, because, you know, Debussy is very close to the patron that support Tchaikovsky. That's Natasha von Meck, I think that's her name. So in a way, I think this Russian composer really influenced him. But he changed, of course, the accidentals there. So what does this tell us? I really think because the melody is so broad, suddenly so broad, it comes out from very urgent and lively. And then I think Debussy is expressing his comfort. He finds comfort and relief in this melody, you know, as he decides to end his marriage. So he felt, you know, a sense of relief that now he's on Jersey Island with Emma, the girl that he was really infatuated with. So he wanted to express comfort and relief in this situation. Then we see the same mandolin rhythm. It grows higher, grows more wild, there's more chords. So, and the fortissimo, and as if, you know, Debussy is screaming with rage and frustration here. So he's just very angry. He's just, you know, throughout his vent at this music is expressing that. So we could hear the tritoned. Here, lots of tritones and chromaticism. Yeah. Then suddenly it changed again. So here in the Mass, so far we have experienced how the mood changed so fast. You know, in the very beginning was this tragedy, the tragic melody, and then we have the Tchaikovsky quotation of his melody, and then suddenly it's the rage, and then here is he's groaning. The rhythmic ostinato become very soft. It's almost like a background. It faints, you know. In this passage, I think I would imagine Debussy is just complaining, groaning, sighing. Why is this happening to me? You know, this whole passage is almost take up almost a page of to express his dissatisfaction, you know, his unpleasantness with his wife, Lily. So then in the middle passage, we see there's a marking that says a bit slower. This we could hear the melody is no more like so active here. Here we have a chordal section, very long chordal section. It's so bare. I really think this passage is about expressing, you know, his deep feeling of guilt, regret, and hopelessness. But of course, if you're not listening to it very attentively, you might think, oh, what is he trying to do here? And why is the Mass still there? At first, when I played this piece, I felt like this Mass is such an intrusion. It doesn't go together with this slower section. Why would he put the Mass on here? But exactly that is the whole idea of the whole piece, is about to put that Mass even at a place you don't expect it. So you shouldn't be expecting that Debussy had a two elements. One is a mask and one is the real feeling inside, which is the long melody. So here, like we said about, is talking about Debussy's feeling of guilt, regret, and hopelessness. Then suddenly in such desert, we felt like he's so empty. He was like hopeless. He felt there's no more hope in this marriage. He's not planning to, of course, obviously to be reconciled to Lily. Then suddenly he just create this dreamy sound world, pentatonism, where there is no rhythmic ostinato. So like heaven, you know. So here we know that Debussy is seeking hope. So again, there's this simultaneous feeling of the opposite. One is hopeless. Before he sees hopeless, then suddenly he sees hope in just four measures of hope, although it's dreamy. And you could think that Debussy is want to transport us, an audience, to a different sound world, and then back to the reality again. So the whole painting of Watteau, actually, there's a lot of painting of Watteau's that actually say about how you know, humans during that time, they want to escape to this heavenly paradise. That painting itself would transport the people who enjoy to look at the painting to be transported to an imaginary heavenly paradise. So this is what Debussy is trying to emulate Watteau's too. That's what I think. So let's see. And this is at the very end. So the journey of the Mass, everything comes back as usual, like what we said before. So in the beginning, there was a lively rhythmic passage, and then there's a slower passage, and then the rhythmic, this comes back again, but it's in G major. Everything kind of repeat. It's going back to how it was in the very beginning, except for the coda. Now, this is the place where the Mass actually fell, and then we hear the tragic melody, like what how I played before just now. This is actually telling us, this is it, is hopeless. It's a dead end marriage. You know, this is the, there's no more reconciliation. There's no happy ending in this story. In this love story, there's no happy ending. Now, the very interesting is that very end, the mandolin rhythm slowly vanished, although there's still the last reappearance of the mandolin rhythm slowly disappear, and you have an A major chord, as if he's so decisive about his plan to end marriage. And the end of this piece, I think, is the most intense in expressing tragedy. I waited until the sound actually goes off, and I want the audience to listen to that silence right after this fermata. So hold this the chord as long as possible, so you could really feel the tragedy in this piece. In the word of Debussy, he actually confided to Margaret Long. Amelia Santosa was actually talking about her. So she studied with Debussy, and Debussy told her that this piece, Masque, is not about the Italian comedy. It is the tragic expression of existence. So we are just not making assumption, and we're not trying to cook up some story by connecting Debussy's personal life with this piece. But I really think that I'm very inspired when I read his story, and it happened around the same time, even if he was not inspired by these two women to write this piece. I mean, you could find your way on how you could be inspired. So this piece, when you perform it and when you learn it, it becomes very personal to you. So I'm going to let you know about this colloquy sentimental. I told you before, on this Jersey island, Debussy actually sent the manuscript of these 3 songs that he wrote, and it's actually by the poetry by Paul Verlaine, and he sent it to Durand. And this is at the 3rd song, number 3. When I read this, it actually really tells about the tragedy that's being felt at the very end of Masque. So I'm going to read this very slowly. After I read it, I'm going to have you listen to the final passage while reading this again on your own. This is basically a conversation about 2 ghosts, about 2 lovers that was once, they were in love with each other, but now they're dead. So when they appear again as ghosts, they had this conversation. One ghost was so fond of his lovers, but the other lovers responded very coldly, as if there was no such thing that happened. So I really think that cold-hearted one is Debussy, and the other ghost is Lily. It's very sad, actually very sad of what actually happened, because once Debussy told Lily that he is going to end the marriage, actually Lily was so devastated. Actually, he tried to commit suicide, and it was not good, although he survived, but he was badly injured. So let's read this colloquy sentimental, and has been translated to English by Richard Stokes. In the ancient park, deserted and frozen, 2 shapes have just passed by. Their eyes are dead, and their lips are lifeless, and their words can hardly be heard. In the ancient park, deserted and frozen, 2 specters were recalling the past. Do you remember our past rapture? What would you have me remember? Does your heart still search at my very name? Do you still see my soul when you dream? No. Ah, the beautiful taste of inexpressible bliss when our lips met. It may have been so. How blue the sky, how hopes ran high. Hope has fled, vanquished to the black sky. So they walk on through the wild glasses, and the night alone heard their words. Now, when I play at the very end, I want you to just read the conversation between these 2 ghosts recalling their past. Okay, so with the poetry being read to you, that would mark the end. I would like to end with a black screen because it's a tragedy. Debussy really mourns and grieves over what happened to him, and he is ready to move on to the next chapter with Emma. So before Dr. Joyeuse is going to present about the Joyeuse, let me present you this picture. This is the painting that inspired Paul Verlaine and also Debussy to write about the Joyeuse. It's the land of happiness. So the embarkation of Cithara is actually a mythical place where people are enjoying themselves. Again, in a natural park, and you see couples by Watteau in 1717. So that's the end of my lecture. And thank you so much for listening.